first of all, I have Lieutenant Samuel Kirk Rojka. He's been working with the Tampa Police Department since 1994, working in various assignments through the agency. In 2009, he was designated to represent the TPD on the 13th Circuit Juvenile Justice Board, for which he currently serves as vice chair. And as TPD's juvenile justice subject matter expert, he's going to speak to us today about juvenile policing. Lieutenant Rojka.
I came up through patrol like everybody did, or does, and then I went over to Detective Division for a short while, then I went back and I worked in the School Resource Officer unit, supervising that unit. That time I did become a member of the Juvenile Justice Board, and ever since then, I've taken really an active part in our agency's policy shaping and making, and even within our circuit, the policy shaping and making as it relates to juvenile justice. I'm a firm believer that the pendulum has swung way too far one way in arresting everybody. And I think at some point it's coming back to the other way where we're maybe getting a little too loose on some things, and we need to strike the balance in between. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the juvenile justice system from my perspective. I'll tell you a little bit about what we've done in our agency as it relates to how we've been able to suppress, number one, crime, but also suppress arrest. I'm a firm believer that not every juvenile that does a crime, even though it meets the statutory definition of a crime, deserves to go to jail. Kids are stupid. I can say that because, number one, I was a kid. Number two, I have two boys. I should need to say nothing else, okay? My 13-year-old the other day just about lost his life in my house because he told my wife, who was sitting there on the couch getting on to him about his schoolwork, gets up and walks away from her. Son, where are you going? I will not sit here and be dissed by my mother. Let's just say when Daddy got home, that didn't go over too well. Kids make dumb decisions. We all realize that. So we need to find a system that balances the childhood failure to register in the gray matter and make dumb decisions part of it, to really holding kids accountable who are in the deep end of the system. And what we're seeing more and more from our perspective is we have kids, before they would wade into the pool of juvenile justice from the shallow end and then work their way to the deep end and go off for a deep swim and sometimes come back. Now they're just jumping off head first into the deep end. We have kids out there who are 13, 14 years old, and I think the sheriff's office said the same thing, who are out there committing robberies, burglaries, not just burglaries where they're breaking into your shed, breaking into your house while you're home. And anybody who wants to say that is a victimless or a property crime only, I know what the statute says and how it's viewed. It is not just a property crime. Because you sit down and you talk to a victim who's had their house burglarized and come face to face with somebody in their house, that became a person's crime, not just, that is not just a property crime, that is now a person's crime. And so, these kids are doing some horrific things. But we'll talk about that a little bit, about some things we did, and then also talk to you about some of the things that we're facing and challenging ourselves with on the Juvenile Justice Board, and that being DMC. Everybody know what DMC is? Anybody not know what DMC is? Disproportionate minority contact, or RED, racial ethnic disparity. It is an issue that we're trying to figure out and get a handle on in Hillsborough County. And I'll go over some stats with you on that. I'm a numbers guy. My favorite subject in college was quantitative analysis. So I like crunching numbers. I've looked at them, I've studied them. And there's some trends that we're seeing over the past decade that I think I hope you find interesting. So in 1993, I don't know how old most of you are in the room. Most of you are probably younger than me. In 1993, we had the tourist that was killed in South Florida, German tourist killed in South Florida by a 14-year-old boy. As a result of that, at the time, we did not have a juvenile justice system in Hillsborough County, or in the state of Florida. It was all ran by HRS, Health and Rehabilitative Services, I think was the correct acronym, or title. And then in 1994, after that, there was a big outcry for, we have to do something with these kids. At that time, I know when I came on with Tampa Police Department, car thefts were through the roof. We had a no chase policy in Hillsborough County. In Tampa, we had a no chase policy. Kids were stealing cars. They'd wave at us as they went by. and kept on going with the cars. Finally, we got a different mayor in office, and he said, chase them till the wheels fall off. Crime went down immediately because there was some impact. There was something there for us to do to stop these kids from doing these crimes. But in 1994, when they created the juvenile justice system, and up until 2000, especially in 2000, when they went to this tough love where they got away from rehabilitative services, and that's when it shifted more to the punitive side or the punishment side of juvenile justice. At that point, we started arresting everybody. All kids go to jail. You get in a fight at school, out come the handcuffs, you go to jail. You do something, you steal your friend's cell phone at school, out come the handcuffs, you go to jail. It was really a zero tolerance, and I'm sure everybody's heard that before in the justice system. It was a zero tolerance approach. So we were simply following the system to where it was leading us, and how we felt that we thought at the time, and the current thinking of the day was, let's hold them accountable, zero tolerance, iron fist when it comes to enforcement, and we'll win this war. What we ended up realizing very quickly is that while we might win the war, better said, we might win the battle, we're still losing some of the war because long-term it's not benefiting every child to be arrested. We know that 66% of kids who have first-time contact with the system will only have one contact with the system. So in 2009, when I came to the Juvenile Justice Board, we started looking at this civil citation statute. It had been around for many years. TPD in the Sheriff's Office, TPD piloted program in around 2002, 2003. And quickly the Sheriff's Office came on board with a juvenile civil citation, and it was implemented, but it was an optional program. Now, I was a school resource officer at the time. I was of the mindset, take no prisoners. Take no prisoners. You mess up, you go to jail. That's what I'm trained to do. And understand, that's what police officers are trained to do. We're trained to put the bad guy in jail. And it's kind of like a canine dog. A canine dog does not know the difference between you and a bad guy. But once he locks on you, you're the target. We're kind of like, when we see a crime, we lock in, we have a way to do business. That's how we retrain. That's the mentality. So when that first civil citation came around, I did not like it. I would not issue them. They were optional. No, I'm not. This is nothing. Why am I going to give this kid nothing when they did this? 2009 rolls around, I get to the Juvenile Justice Board, and we start expanding the civil citation. And I start really studying the purpose of the civil citation. And what it's for is for those first-time misdemeanors in Hillsborough County. First-time misdemeanors. And at that time, they only allowed 8 in the schools, which were the most common charges kids were arrested for, absent marijuana and domestic violence. We started looking at that, and we realized that really you get more out of a civil citation than you do if you arrest the child and take them to JAC. JAC has a rule that 6 hours they need to be out. I believe that's defined by statute. So if it's a misdemeanor or they score no points or they score less than 12 points to get them into secure detention, their goal is to get them back out in 6 hours. And if it's a misdemeanor scores 0 points, they're going to get released within 6 hours. It's going to go to the state attorney's office. As much as we love the state attorney's office, they're our friends. They don't file the charge. They either divert them or whatever the case may be. Most of these misdemeanor cases go nowhere. So when you do the civil citation, when we looked at in 2009, it really didn't have a lot of teeth even in the initial onset. We said, look, if we're going to expand this countywide, which was the plan, it has to have some teeth to it. Otherwise, law enforcement will not sign on to moving this out countywide. Sheriff's Office started a pilot program down in South County to deal with shoplifting. Shoplifting is a big issue with our kids. So in South County, they started a pilot program, and that quickly evolved into a countywide program as civil citation. And when your child gets a civil citation now, what will happen is they will be told to they have to report to the JDP office, Juvenile Diversion Office, or JDP program down at the courthouse, have to report there. There they can get sanctions. They will have community service hours. They can have classes they have to attend, mental health assessments, drug assessments. Everything they would get is if they went before a judge, and the judge had a adjudicatory hearing, and they were adjudicated, or they were found guilty. They got all the same sanctions. Well, that's a win-win. It cuts down on attorney's workload. It saves time and hassle for the parent. They don't have to go to court because this is your attorney's right. That's a joke. Yeah. So, well, then I think attorneys just love to file hearing dates and reset, come back this day. That's all gone. I don't know if that's how you bill. You might have lost money on this deal. That's another joke. Work with me, okay? But we realized that it was much more streamlined and efficient to do a civil citation than it is to take a kid to jail. Now that's a hard battle we fought even within our agency. I can't speak to the sheriff's office on this one. I can tell you from my agency, we have some old crusty guys at our agency. I'm an old guy there, but I'm not crusty. I've got some old crusty guys there. And they are bent, no, this is not good, we need to put them in jail. And so we're fighting that mentality. That's a mentality we're fighting. And it's a cultural shift. Remember, we're trained, these guys came on 20, 25 years ago, they were trained to do one job, and their mindset of justice is this way, and we're trying to reprogram to think a different way to do it. So we were successful in 2009 to get an expansion, it's really about 2010, to get an expansion to countywide for all juveniles on enumerated 8 charges. And again, they were petty theft, battery, disruption of school function, trespass, possession of alcohol, can't be intoxicated because you have to make an informed decision on whether you participate in the program, and a couple of other charges in there. Around 2015, we decided to take a look and say, look, why don't we expand this out a little further? Because we're seeing that we're not being effective, we're seeing it is being effective. Public safety was always the number one concern when it came to civil citations. Is the public going to be safe if we don't hold these kids accountable and put them in jail? Remember, they're only going for 6 hours. I don't think public safety is an issue. But we looked at the public safety side of it and we said, we're not any worse for the wear. Doing a civil citation on these enumerated 8, let's expand. So we did. We expanded out, and instead of saying just these 8 are eligible for civil citation, we turned it and said all are eligible except for 13. Now there's 13 where you're more serious things, such as sex charges, resist arrest, false name to Leo, things that really would either inhibit our ability to do our job. And listen, if you're going to run from us, there's a bigger disconnect there than a civil citation. If we're going to have to chase you down, or if we're trying to talk to you and you keep giving us a false name. And listen, anytime I talk to somebody about their name, and I know listen, you know your kids. You can tell if your kid's lying. You can tell if a kid on the street's lying. Gives your name, it's not right. What's your name? Johnny. No, it's not. What's your name? You play that game after about 15 times, it's time for them to take a ride. So we did that in 2015, but we left out marijuana and domestic violence. There was just no appetite across the board for those two. A couple of years later, we readdressed the issue of marijuana and domestic violence. And now we have our list down to just maybe 4 charges that are not eligible. Everything else is eligible, with some being optional, such as resist arrest. So if I get a kid who dare I say, a minor resist, he can still be eligible for civil citation. We did include marijuana and domestic violence. Domestic violence cases, they go to Lake Mag. So everybody know where Lake Mag is, up off of Clay Magnum Lane up in the county. I'm so glad it's in the county. I cheered for that. I championed, I really did. I steered the committee that looked at all the civil citation stuff as it relates to domestic violence, and it just worked out that was the best solution. We actually wanted to do it at the Jack Center. Jack just wasn't built out for it. So we had to go to Lake Mag. They became a great partner with us. So now the process is, when a child is, when we go to a call for domestic violence and we get to the home and we determine an offense has taken place, we have to get consent from the parent, which is a challenge. Because I'll get into that in a little bit second. It's a challenge sometimes with the parents that we're dealing with. They're upset that their child has battered them in some way, shape, or fashion. I think if my child hit me, I know my reaction. It would not be to call the police. Okay? I would just take care of it myself. But they call us and then they're angry. So when they're angry, getting a parent sometimes to consent to go to Lake Mag is hard to do. No, I want my kid to go to jail. I want them in jail. No, that's not the best solution. Because here's why. When we take them to Lake Mag, we establish that they have to provide wraparound services, which means when they go there, they immediately start counseling with the child and with the family at the same time. And our goal is to reunify that family within 2 weeks. If you go to Jack and you go to jail and you're booked on it, it scores 0 points on the DRE. Everybody know what the DRE is? Okay. You score 0 points on the DRE, but you still go to secure detention. Who do we typically send to secure detention? Deep end kids. Our burglars, robbers, murderers, sex offenders, repeat violent offenders, gun offenders. Those are the ones that are in secure detention. And our secure detention population has really come down in Hillsborough County. We're down to an average of about maybe, I'm going to ballpark and say about 50 is the daily average. It's not bad. Large county. We have over around 210,000 school-age children in Hillsborough County. We only have 50 in secure detention. I think that's a pretty good ratio when you look at it from that perspective. But we take that kid from domestic violence and we stick him into secure detention. What happens is now he's around all these other bad elements, and he's going to sit there until the parents decide to take the child home. And the parent holds all the cards. And so we're trying to convince the parent, no, let's do this. Let's put him in Lake Mag, provide wraparound services, and it's been very, very, very effective. And the public defender has been on board with us. They've come alongside, and they'll talk to the parents too. They get one of them on the phone. Yes, this is the best option. Let's go with the civil citation. It's best for everybody. A couple of benefits to the civil citation. Big one is live scan. Anybody know what live scan is? When you go to jail and you get arrested, which I imagine none of you have done, you put your hand on a little machine, they scan your fingerprints, boom, it goes straight up to FDLE. It creates a criminal history on you and attaches to you forever and a day. Now I know there's some rules as it relates to juveniles and charges as juvenile. They fall off at a certain age. There's some conditions to that, but regardless, you have a criminal history. So when you go to jail, that's what happens. When you go through the civil citation, that doesn't happen. You don't have a criminal history. And you don't have to say that you've been arrested because we've been diverted from the system. It is a pre-arrest avoidance program. So while we do all of our normal functions, it doesn't classify as an arrest. It goes into a diversion program right away. So we've made some great strides with that. I think our biggest challenge is still implementation. While it's policy, it's been out for many years. I have to do a monthly audit of all of our juvenile arrests, misdemeanor arrests, to see if we're in compliance with that. And for the most part, we are. Every once in a while, one slips through the crack, and I have to address that. So I got to look at my time because I don't want to go over. Does that say 24? Sure does. Okay, a few more minutes. I took my glasses off so I can't see it. So one of the issues that we've addressed on the Juvenile Justice Board, which is also part of what we do in law enforcement, is we started looking at arrest trends. Back in 2011, we had over 11,000 arrests in Hillsborough County for juveniles in 1 year. 11,000.
200,000 school-age kids.
206,000 kids, 11,000 arrests in 1 year. So when we started with the civil citation and we started looking at what we were arresting for, I know my agency I can speak for because I was a supervisor of the school resource officer unit. I said, stop arresting kids for every little thing. We have to find better solutions. If we get involved in something, it doesn't mean we have to arrest somebody. So let's put the brakes on. And that was effective and it worked. And I'm pleased to say that since 2011, where we had over 11,000 arrests, to last year, we were under 4,000. That's a significant reduction. And I'll tell you that most of those arrests that we're looking at are not petty arrests. My misdemeanor arrest report is very small, which means we're arresting most of our kids either for VOP or we're arresting them on felony charge, something more significant. But the interesting part about that is when you look at the numbers in Hillsborough County for the demographics. So the highest percentage of ethnic group in Hillsborough County is Latino or Hispanic. Next is your white. Next after that is Black, African American, and then it really falls off there for American Indian and Asian population. However, what do you think the highest arrest group is? African American. They're the highest at around 56% of all arrests. 56%. So there's a disproportionate number of youth based on the percentages of them being arrested. But the interesting thing is that even though our number of arrests have come down from 11,000 in 2011 to last year was under 3,000, the same number or percentage is still being arrested across the board. It averages between 55 and 59%. 59 is high, 55 is more of your average. Toss out low and high, and you're about 55%. White males or white youth is around 30%. So we have to start asking ourselves why. A lot of times the focus was looked at the system. They said, let's look at what the police are doing. Let's look at what the lawyers are doing. Let's look at what the judges are doing. Because people thought that we as law enforcement had implicit bias. And so because it resulted in implicit bias, we would focus in on one group, but we wouldn't focus on the other group. I could see that if we saw spikes in different things, but it's a constant number across the board. And it's a constant number on females. All of our numbers on every demographic across the board, regardless of the number of arrests, is consistent. It's almost a straight line. Same number of females are arrested, same number of black females arrested, same number of white females or percentages across the board. Same thing with African American males, same thing with white males. It's all equal across the board. Doesn't matter how many arrests, the percentage is always the same. So it leads to the question, what's causing that? What's causing that? So there's some different things that I believe are affecting it. And I think as a society and as a group of criminal justice, our group involved in criminal justice, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're in law enforcement, we have to start looking at root causes. I am firmly convinced that one of the main root causes of the disproportionate number of arrests is not so much based on color, but socioeconomic issues. Let me give you an example. If I go to South Tampa, police are the last line of defense. You would almost have to have a murder in your house before you call us.
Even then, probably calling the lawyer first.
Call the lawyer first. Who's going to tell you, don't report it? No, I'm kidding. But that's my point. In fact, when we show up at Colbert Isles, we're told we have to use the back door. True story. Depending on what your socioeconomic status is, determines how quickly you pick up the phone and call the police. How many of you would pick up and call the police because the dog pooped in your yard from the neighbor's house? We get those calls. We get them. You know, we get calls for the dumbest things in the world, but a lot of times we see that when the area is impoverished, and it doesn't matter if it's white or black or Latino, if the area is impoverished, police become the first line of defense for everything. That child hit my car with his baseball bat. I want something done. He's playing a game in the street. He didn't, come on. Let's be reasonable here. So, I mean, it's things like that we have to deal with. Our crossover kids are a big problem for us. They're huge. We're dealing with Eckerd Connects now up in my area. I have District 2. The crossover kids, what we're finding out, and I was discussing with the sheriff's office when we were outside, is that we're finding that we have no teeth in our juvenile justice system for them. Because when they're not on probation, even if they are on probation, we place them with an agency like Eckerd Connects. The child refuses to comply with anything they say. They rule the roost. They run the house. We're lost. They call us. I can't do anything. I can't make them get in the car and go to their appointment. I can't make them go to their placement today. I can't make them do anything. The only thing I can make them do is encourage them to go to school or be in violation of your conditions of probation. Then I can effectively do something. But if it's not during school hours, I can't do a blasted thing. So we're struggling with crossover kids. I believe socioeconomic plays into it. And back to the socioeconomic impact of it. I pulled up some statistics. I was looking at them today just to try to refresh my mind and get ready for this afternoon. Intact families, the poverty level for intact families is around maybe 10%. 10%. For a female head of household, single parent, poverty rate's over 25%. That's a huge number. That's a huge impact. That affects kids. It affects children. So we have to look at some of the societal issues that we have underlying in our communities. I don't think it's necessarily policing. That's the problem with why so many kids are getting arrested of a certain group. I'm not going to say there's not some implicit bias in every one of us. Everybody has implicit bias of some kind. But I don't think that's the driving force behind the disproportionate minority contact. I believe there's underlying factors and currents that are there because numbers bear that out. Numbers don't lie. That's what I love about numbers. Numbers don't lie. This just statistics are statistics. You can't change them. So I think we as a group, as a whole structure in the juvenile justice system, we need to start looking at what can we do to impact these kids' lives in a different, meaningful way. Kids who don't go to school won't do well. We all know that. And if kids are not encouraged to get their education, it becomes an issue. Here's the other problem that we see. Our system that allows, we have a lot of parents, and I can say this because I've seen it, I've worked in the schools for years. We have a lot of parents who will go and get their kids diagnosed with a disorder so they can collect benefits. That becomes a perpetual cycle, generational cycle, that we're going to have to somehow break. And I don't have the answer. I'm just telling you what the numbers show us and what we're seeing and observing. Because if I have a young child or I have a young adult who's having a child who's doing this and that there's money attached to it and so that it becomes a pattern, course of conduct over time. I'm not saying that's the case for everything, but I've spoken to enough school principals to know that they see it, they're frustrated with it, and it becomes an issue. So that's one that we have to tackle somehow. I don't know if it's necessarily urban juvenile justice, but I can tell you that we have our work cut out for us for that remaining, 3,000 to 4,000 kids that we're arresting. They're deep end kids. They're bad kids. Bad. They're killing each other. Don't believe me? Come work with me sometime over in East Tampa around 40th and Hillsborough corridor and listen to our shot spotter go off, and sheriff's office can tell you the same thing. Listen to the shot spotter go off and then respond to the calls. It's a lot of times juvenile and juvenile shooting and killing each other. It's a serious, serious problem. We have made great headway in pushing down the number of arrests, and we're proud of that. Some other things that we've done, we've given our officers the ability to lessen or reduce a charge from a felony to a misdemeanor to make it eligible for a civil citation. I think that's great. So the cause behind that was you have a kid who has a cell phone. How much is his cell phone worth? If I had to pay for it, which I did not on my plan, I got it for free.
$800.
$750 now, just changed. But yes, more than $300. This phone is valued at right around $1,000. I don't know why, but that's what the value is. So if a kid steals this, it's a felony. Where do they go? Go to jail. It's a blasted cell phone that I paid nothing for whatsoever. It was free. They just mailed it to me. So we said, well, let's do this. Let's take those cases, officer, reduce it to a misdemeanor, document the report, follow it through as a civil citation, and that's been very effective. And the other thing that we've done is we've said that kids under the age of 13 will not be arrested custodial arrest, unless it's a forcible felony. And it's defined in our policy what a forcible felony is. And it's going to be something such as your burglaries, robberies, ag assaults, attempted murder, this more serious sexual battery, all those serious crimes. If you don't commit one of those offenses, then you're going to, you'll be referred to the state, but we're not going to make the custodial arrest. And even once you get past 13 or 13 and older, you can, the officer has the discretion to direct file the case or do a misdemeanor complaint rather than, and for me, direct file is, as I just referred to the state. Felonies get direct filed from us directly to the state. I know in the judicial world, direct file goes from juvenile to adult court. For us, direct file is something different. So we can direct file the felonies or we can do a misdemeanor complaint on the misdemeanors. So we've done some great things to try to reduce the number of arrests. I'll leave you with the words of Mark Twain, the great philosopher, and how to deal with juveniles. Anybody ever heard how he said to deal with juveniles? And having a 13-year-old boy, I really understand it now. He says, when they turn 13, put them in a barrel, feed them through the knothole. When they turn 16, plug the hole. So, anyway, any questions I can answer for you? I'm out of time, so any questions? No? Okay, very good. Thank you.